Over hopefully soon, but will the entire situation have changed us psychologically? Dr. Victoria Kelly is with us again to discuss maybe those long-term effects. Now, last month rather, when you were with us, we were talking about cabin fever, and I think that's a pretty normal thing that many people are feeling. So kind of go through that for us one more time about how cabin fever is not an actual mental disorder.
Right. So if everybody just takes a mental snapshot of everything they've been feeling over the last 3 weeks or so, that's pretty normal. So the anxiety, the panic, even mood swings, emotional exhaustion, feeling irritated or angry, restless, problems with sleep or concentration, maybe those are all a normal reaction to being quarantined.
Okay, now let's look at the health footprint rather of COVID-19. There's kind
Right.
of four waves to this. Explain that.
Yes, so there's this graph circulating on social media right now, and it's attributed to a pulmonary and critical care fellow physician. And it describes four waves. And the first wave of the health footprint, of COVID is what's going on right now. This is the immediate morbidity and mortality that is going on related to the COVID-19, and where with flattening the curve is the goal. The second wave is what we are also starting to see now, which is, when emergency rooms and other services are burdened, where do you go if you're having a heart attack or a stroke or psychiatric crisis? So this impact of resource restriction on they're still urgent, but they're non-COVID conditions. The third wave is basically what happens and the impact when you interrupt chronic care. So things like mammograms, colonoscopies, diabetic eye exams, things that down the road will absolutely impact your health conditions. And then the fourth wave, which will increase as time goes on, as the health footprint continues to expand, is the psychic trauma and mental illnesses and the economic injury and even a burnout that can happen.
So I don't even know, where are we in this whole wave? Maybe between 2, 3, I don't know. It's still in one.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we're still in one.
hmm
Yeah, and we're being impacted by the second wave right now. And us in the mental health treatment community, we are keeping an eye out for things, and we know that that fourth wave is coming.
Yes, absolutely. So who is going to be at the highest risk for having these problems longer term?
hmm So the short answer is we don't ultimately know, but the better answer is if we look at what has happened with other pandemics across the nation through the first SARS and Ebola, what we know is that the people who are at highest risk of having longer term problems would be those that tend to have a feeling of helplessness, and they can't tolerate mentally, they just can't tolerate uncertainty. If you know someone who was hospitalized due to the pandemic, and if you have a key symptom of depression, either as a pre-existing condition or as a part of your reaction to the quarantine and the pandemic. And of course, the population of caretakers, these essential workers, the frontline healthcare workers, absolutely are at a pretty high risk of having longer term complications.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, the things that they are seeing and experiencing on a daily basis. So what are the long-term risks? Because this is something that could maybe go on for years, right?
Yeah, I mean, by all projections, life won't return to normal as we see it for at least probably a year or two until a vaccine or something else comes up that can really help squash it. But if you look at the bigger picture, if you right now look ahead and think, oh, I want to do this in July, or I want to go to a wedding or do these sorts of things, immediately what goes through your mind is some of the panic of, am I going to be able to do this or that? And you are kind of walk on eggshells with things. So post-traumatic stress disorder is one of the biggest risks to look out for ongoing after the crux of everything has passed. And so that's an anxiety disorder. It falls within that class. And one of the key symptoms are that you avoid stimuli associated with whatever the trauma or traumatic events were, and you re-experience it, either through flashbacks, nightmares, and you can have this kind of central nervous system hyper-arousal where you're just very vigilant to everything that's going on.
And then you can also have, alcohol, substance abuse issues as well, I would imagine.
Yes. Yeah, so that's probably one of the biggest ones. If we look at what people tend to do when they're stressed, is drink. and that can absolutely cause problems. And being intoxicated is one of the highest risk factors for violence, in fact. So that's another long-term complication, actually, is death from either domestic violence, suicide, or child abuse. So keeping an eye out on your coping skills during this time is going to be important, and maybe reach out for some healthy coping skills instead of just drinking alcohol, and maybe some of the more unhealthy coping skills.
Right, and we have a list also of some of the other long-term risks here. Domestic violence, agoraphobia is something else. People might be afraid really to go back out into public and be around people, right?
Right. We are going to be seeing the world through an entirely different filter of what is considered safe and unsafe. And that's going to take a while to reset to what feels like a new normal.
Yeah. And then we just want people to know, of course, that there are resources available for them if they need it.
Yes, absolutely. The mental health community has absolutely stepped up. And here locally, the Lucas County Mental Health Board, they have what we call a warm hotline. Instead of a hotline, it's a warm line. So it provides emotional support to anybody in the county. The Zeph Center has a free hotline geared towards frontline healthcare workers. UTMC has a stress hotline for their employees, for example, and other resources like the United Way, if you just dial 211. And for people who are in recovery from alcohol or substance use, SAMHSA, substance abuse, and mental health, they have on their website, you can get a link to all their virtual recovery meetings, since we have to physically distance still.
All right, very good. Well, Dr. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us today. And here's to hoping that we all just stay safe and healthy, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Thanks for joining us. Take care.